Everyone saw the smile. The press conferences. The batting practice sessions. The casual waves to fans gathered outside the facility in Glendale. The photographs that circulated across Japanese and American media in the opening days of Dodgers spring training, Ohtani relaxed, present, already looking like a man preparing to do something extraordinary again. Everyone saw exactly what they expected to see. But Freddie Freeman saw something else. And what Freeman saw in a quiet corner of that locker room in Glendale has changed the way people close to this story are understanding everything that has happened since the 2026 WBC ended. Ohtani was alone. And he was crying. First, it is important to understand the context of what Freeman witnessed before drawing conclusions from it. Spring training at the Dodgers facility in Glendale is not a private environment. It is structured, observed, and populated with staff, media, and teammates from the first session of the morning through to the final cooldown of the day. Players learn quickly how to exist within that level of visibility. The veterans especially develop a practiced ease with being watched at all times, a kind of professional composure that becomes so natural it is eventually indistinguishable from their actual personality. Ohtani has operated within that visibility longer than most. Since his arrival in America, the level of attention directed at him has been without parallel in the sport. Every workout. Every at-bat. Every interaction with a teammate or a coach. The cameras have always been there, and he has always moved through that reality with the same untroubled steadiness. Which is why what Freeman encountered was so jarring. He had not gone looking for it. He had simply moved through a part of the facility at a moment when the foot traffic had thinned, and he found Ohtani in a space that had briefly become private in the way spaces occasionally do between the organized activities of a training day. Ohtani was not performing distress. He was not making himself visible in grief. He was sitting with it quietly, in a moment he had clearly believed was his own. Freeman did not intrude. But what he saw has not left him. To understand what Freeman witnessed in that locker room, you have to go back to what the WBC actually cost Ohtani this time. Not in physical terms. Not in the statistics or the performance metrics that analysts will reconstruct across dozens of articles in the weeks ahead. In personal terms. Ohtani's relationship with the World Baseball Classic is not transactional. He has said this in various ways across different interviews over the years, and the people who have been around him during tournament preparations describe it consistently. The WBC is the one competitive environment that reaches something in him that the regular season, for all its demands, does not touch in quite the same way. It is the reunion of something. The return to a shared language. The experience of being surrounded again by players who grew up in the same baseball culture, who understand the same history, who carry the same foundational love for the game that was built in the same country he was built in. A former national team member who trained alongside Ohtani during a previous WBC cycle spoke about what the preparation period looked like from close range. The daily routine never changed. The meals, the conditioning work, the approach to film study, all of it carried the same precision and consistency that defines everything Ohtani does. But there was something additional in his engagement with the team environment. A warmth that expressed itself in small, specific ways. The time he spent with younger players before sessions began. The jokes that broke tension in difficult moments. The way he listened, actually listened, when a teammate raised something about their game. One player from that cycle recalled struggling with an aspect of his preparation and raising it almost apologetically, expecting a brief acknowledgement and a redirect. Ohtani gave him 40 minutes. Not with instruction. With questions. Asking the player to describe his own process, his own intuitions, his own sense of what was and was not working. Then helping him think through it rather than simply providing the answer. That kind of engagement is not what the cameras capture. It does not appear in any highlight package. But it is what his teammates remember. This is the detail that matters most, and it is the one that is most easily misread. When Freeman described what he witnessed in the Glendale locker room to those close to him, he was careful about how he framed it. He did not describe a man who had collapsed under the weight of loss. He did not describe someone whose confidence had been damaged or whose sense of self had been shaken. What he described was a man grieving something specific. There is a difference between those things, and the difference is significant. Ohtani has experienced defeat before. In individual games, in playoff campaigns, in tournament settings. His response to losing has always been the same, a quiet, internal processing followed by a return to the work. He does not carry results into the next day. He has said as much in interviews, and the people who have watched him closely over many years confirm it in how he shows up for every preparation session regardless of what preceded it. What happened at the 2026 WBC was not simply a loss. It was, by his own declaration made at the Tokyo hearing, the last time he will wear that uniform in that tournament. What Freeman encountered in that locker room in Glendale was a man sitting with that specific reality. Not the defeat itself, but what the defeat marked the end of. The final chapter of something that had given him experiences and connections that no other competitive environment in his career has replicated. He had announced the withdrawal before spring training began. The decision had been made and communicated through the proper channels. But there is a difference between making a decision and living in the first days after it becomes permanent. Freeman understood immediately what he was witnessing. And those who know Freeman describe his response as characteristic of who he is. He gave Ohtani the privacy of that moment completely, and he has spoken about it only to people he trusts, in terms that make clear his respect for what Ohtani was processing. This is something his longest-serving teammates describe with a kind of affectionate frustration. In the Dodgers environment, as in every environment he has operated in throughout his professional career, Ohtani is the first to smile. The first to diffuse tension with humor. The last to visibly carry the weight of a bad result or a difficult stretch. His emotional availability in positive moments is genuine and generous. He remembers details about his teammates' lives, asks follow-up questions about things they mentioned weeks earlier, brings an attentiveness to his relationships with the people around him that surprises those who expected the distance of a global superstar. But the interior world behind all of that is carefully maintained. Not hidden in a damaged way. Simply private in the way that very serious people tend to be private about the things that matter most to them. One player who spent an extended period training alongside Ohtani during an off-season described the experience of gradually realizing that the version of Ohtani visible in the clubhouse represented only a fraction of what was actually happening inside him. Not because he was performing, everything he presented was real. But because the depth of his investment in his craft, in his purpose, in the things he cares about most, is held somewhere beneath the surface where most people never reach it. The same player said that on one occasion, after a difficult loss in a game that had significant implications, he watched Ohtani go through the full post-game routine with the same composure he always shows. Equipment organized, nutrition completed, recovery protocol executed, brief and warm interactions with the training staff, then a quiet departure. Nothing in any of it suggested what the game had cost him. But the following morning, in the first session before anyone else arrived, the player encountered Ohtani alone on the field working on the specific aspect of his performance that had contributed to the result. Not punishing himself. Studying. With the same focused curiosity he brings to everything. That is the private version of Ohtani. The one that Freeman caught a glimpse of in that Glendale locker room. When you piece together what people close to the tournament describe, the preparation, the investment, the specific quality of attention Ohtani brought to every shared moment with the national team, a picture forms of what this particular campaign meant to him. He knew going in that it was the last one. The decision to withdraw permanently had been forming for some time before it was formalized and communicated. Those who were in dialogue with him during the preparation period describe a man who was participating in everything with the intensity of someone who understands they are spending something finite. The meals in the cafeteria. The early morning conditioning sessions. The conversations with younger players who were experiencing the WBC environment for the first time. A staff member from the national team operation recalled observing Ohtani in a quiet moment between training sessions, sitting in a common area of the facility, watching a group of younger players working through something on a whiteboard together. He was not participating. He was simply watching, with an expression that the staff member described as something between pride and something harder to name. He sat there for nearly 10 minutes before standing up, walking over, and joining the conversation naturally, without announcement. That image, the man who has already decided this is ending, watching the thing he loves continuing without him, is the emotional context for what Freeman encountered weeks later in Glendale. The loss at the WBC was not just a tournament result. It was the last competitive chapter of the most personally meaningful recurring experience of Ohtani's career. And it ended in defeat, in a way that a man with his standards and his investment will carry differently than a player who arrived at the tournament as an obligation. He had given it everything. And it had still ended this way. Those who know Freddie Freeman well describe a man whose emotional intelligence operates at an unusual level for a professional athlete. He has navigated significant personal difficulty throughout his life and career. He understands grief with a specificity that many people do not develop until much later, if they develop it at all. When he encountered Ohtani in that locker room, he did not speak to him. He did not signal his presence. He gave him the full privacy of the moment and withdrew. But what he said privately afterward reveals what he understood about what he saw. He said it was not sadness about losing. He said it looked like someone saying goodbye to something they loved. That one sentence has circulated quietly among those who have heard it, because it captures something about Ohtani that the performance metrics and the contract discussions and the legacy debates never quite reach. He is a man who loves this. Not the celebrity. Not the contracts. Not the historical comparisons. The game itself, the specific texture of competing at the highest level, the shared experience of preparation and pressure with people who are giving everything they have. The WBC gave him that in a particular form that nothing else does. And now it is over. The Dodgers' spring training camp in Glendale has moved forward. The preparation for the 2026 season has absorbed Ohtani's full attention in the way it always does. The smile is back in place. The routines are executing with their familiar precision. The younger players on the roster are already describing the experience of preparing alongside him in the same terms that national team players always do, not the specific things he does, but the standard his daily choices set for everyone around him. None of that erases what Freeman saw. And none of it is meant to. Ohtani has never run from difficult feelings by performing their absence. He processes them privately, completely, and then returns to the work with everything intact. The grief is real. The love behind the grief is real. And the commitment to honoring both by continuing to prepare at a level that justifies everything he has been given, that is real too. The man Freeman found crying alone in that locker room was not breaking down. He was saying goodbye properly. And anyone who has ever loved something deeply enough to grieve losing it will understand exactly what that looks like. The 2026 season has not yet begun. But Shohei Ohtani has already decided what it is going to mean.